Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are here looking at the Vision Jet. We're going to do a quick check ride to basically get you up to speed to a level where you could fly this thing on VATS and go over all the things you need to know to basically pilot this airplane around competently. It's a fun little airplane. It's got some quirks, but a lot of glass cockpit interaction. So if you like that kind of thing, this is a good airplane for you. So let's hop into the airplane and get started. We're here at Orlando. We're going to be flying down to Miami for a little practice route. All right, so we're in the cockpit of the Vision Jet. It's kind of a unique cockpit because it's very Cirrus-y. If you have the SR-22, it will be a very similar kind of experience. You've got this kind of angled panel, all glass up front, and then buttons down below. Now, other big things, you've got your side stick here. You don't need a stick to fly it. I have a joystick that I use instead of my yoke, but you don't have to, and you can hide it by clicking there. Circuit breakers over here on the left. Your engine control panel right here. You've got off and run and engine start stop. Then we have the main displays. And so I'm going to turn on the batteries. This little shelf here has a lot of your control buttons. It has all your batteries, generators, external lights, your oxygen, and then your anti-ice and probe heat is here as well. I'm going to click the batteries and generators on just to show you. Here we have our PFD on the left side and our MFD over here. And then we have these three control panels that control these things. If you want to control anything on the PFD in front of you, you can do this. You can also press this button to bring it over to nav and comm. And then over here, this MFD, this is where you're going to, I do most of the, most of my interfacing with the airplane, but you can also select over here and have a second one there if you want to do that. So say we wanted to go into the VAMS, VAMS, your virtual aircraft management system, which is how you manage all the external stuff, all the chocks, all the what luggage you want to show, and we'll get into that. Cabin control, ECA, all that stuff is over here on the far right side. Gear, front and center, your baro, your pressure, we can change that, or click for standard. Your autopilot panel is down here in the center. This is an airplane where it's helpful to have some of these things bound if you can. If you have some extra buttons in your control setup, I would recommend binding some kind of autopilot control, just because you do have to take your eye off the ball to use these things. So to use this panel, it's not up front like an airliner. That's my one complaint, but I'm sure it's a lot more ergonomic in real life. But in sim, we actually have to look at it and do that unless you have that bound. I have a Honeycomb Bravo, which has a lot of these functions bound to the autopilot controls. So if we are able to change that and without looking down, that's what's happening. Continue cockpit tour flaps right here. We've got three settings: flaps up, flaps 50, flaps 100. Your flap speeds 50% below 190 knots, 100% below 150 knots, and we'll use 50% flaps for takeoff. Your throttle, very simple, and I only have one axis bound for throttle. That's it. And then trim wheel is right here for all your trim and stuff. And then your auto throttle panel is right here. This is how you control the auto throttle and either direct it from the FMS or do it manually. Finally, if you need to control fuel or anything like that, you can select left, right, or for most cases, we're going to be in auto on that one. Looking around, there's nothing else. If you look up above us, this is our CAPS system, or our parachute, our Cirrus airplane parachute system. None of these things are functional, but this will remove once we remove all the static elements from the airplane. But just an interesting little note up here. If you look up this relatively clean panel and then up on the overhead, that's your emergency parachute. Last thing, I have a view set up. I have a couple views set up back here in the cabin for wing views. But if you want to open the door, you can come back here and click on the lever. And that will open you up to the world. All right, so first things first, I'm going to set our load, and we're going to use the sim weight and balance here. I'm going to load up, we have a passenger, a co-pilot, and we'll take a couple of smaller people in the back, 150, 120. And then maybe 100 pounds of baggage on the way. And then I'm just going to fill up the fuel, maybe 120 gallons. We shouldn't need that much for this flight, but You will have, you will be payload limited if you're trying to take everything and climb really high and go really fast. So that's something to think about. But that's how we're going to do that. And then we can start working on our initialization and aircraft setup. So right now, I mean, if you want to click storage cover, you can put, oh, well, we have to close the door, but. So to close the door again, just click back on the lever. That'll open up the bottom and then the top. So looking at the virtual aircraft management system, this isn't super important. But if you want to put the storage cover on, you can do that, and you'll notice you can't see anything. So this isn't super helpful for flying. You would actually take this off before you get in the airplane, but you can cover it if you want to. So we're going to take make sure all our covers and protectors off. We'll leave wheel chocks on for now. If you want to open up the luggage door and go down to luggage, this is how you change the model of the luggage in there. So if you want to take a golf trip, you can put your golf clubs in, or a snowboarding trip, you get some snowboarding stuff. We'll take snowboarding stuff down to Miami because that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. But we'll leave chocks on for now. But if you do want to go to a taxi or cold and dark, that's how you do this here. Next thing, Bose. Let's get rid of the headphones. We'll put the headphones on. That should get rid of them. And you can put a noise reduction on. That'll quiet up the airplane and just lower the engine noise a little bit. We're going to leave it off for now. Finally, if you want to change the configuration, all this stuff is different interior configurations for the airplane. So you can have an executive, you can have a complete, or you can have a family. And I would just, if you want to play around with it, you can and see what all that does. But those are different configurations, and it just affects the model. Okay, so just checking our database stuff. You can have Navigraph charts linked if you want to. System tests. It'll run through your engine fire install warning. Good to do. And so this is weight and balance, and it should automatically sync from whatever weight you put in. But if anything's different or you want to change something for whatever reason, you can do that here, and it has all the same stations as the sim does. Then finally, flight plan. Right now we've just got MCO to Miami. We will program this in, but this is simply this is the same as programming any other G3000 equipped system. Today we are basically going on a straight out on a SID from Orlando directly to a star. So right now our flight plan is Danny 3. And then our arrival into Miami is going to be the Coastal 2 via to Danny into 8 right. That's what they're saying. And that should all show up there. Now it's throwing an error because, and it does that sometimes, it's because of this waypoint here. Read where we're actually not even going to the end of the departure, but we have a duplicate. So that will sometimes happen, and it'll throw some weirdness in any G3000 aircraft. This is not limited to this. I get this in the Honda Jet too. Just something to think about. If we do want to fix it, one thing we can do is put this in manually based on the chart. But I'll do that off screen. All right, so we've got it in now, and we're going out to Cape, the waypoint. We're going to fly a heading of, I think, 139 out to Cape, and then we'll get radar vectors to UK and climb up. You'll see this kind of problem on a lot of short flights that you might do with the Vision Jet. So it is something that you'll have to keep in mind, but just don't freak out too much. Just keep in mind that all your altitudes are you have to put those in. Right now, we're not as smart as the Honda Jet is in V2. Now, I like to use the checklists, just like the H-Jet. I like to use the checklists. So we'll bring up before engine start. We have done our pre-flight inspection. Doesn't hurt to do a quick look around the outside and make sure you took off all the things. There's no red tags hanging off of it. So that is good. And then to check off things, you have to click on this little wheel here, and that will do it. If you want to scroll, you can I use the mouse scroll wheel, and you can kind of scroll through items. Door is latched and closed. Parking brake is set. Battery 1 and battery 2 are on. Gen 1 and 2 are on. GPU is not applicable. And we have FADEC channel alpha showing. So getting ready for engine start. We can turn our strobe lights on. That's right here. Cast messages are just showing us parking brake is on. Thrust levers are back at idle. No idle cutoff or anything like that. This is the epitome of simplicity. Brakes, we'll hold on the brakes. Engine knob to run over here. We should see that fuel pump on comes on here, and that's also a checklist item. We need to verify that we don't have any other bad cast messages displayed, and we don't. And then you're going to press engine start stop. Bing, bang, boom, that easy. We're going to monitor this whole page, make sure nothing goes red and starts flashing at us. They give you a list of all the things you need to look for. And if you do need to start it off, turn it off, you hit stop and turn off. So all our engine instruments are coming up. They're looking normal. It can be hard to tell, but we should have 25% in one down here in this small green text. The ice protection system. We are in Florida. Outside air temperature right now is not super high, or is not super low. I'm not too concerned about icing, but we will keep an eye on that as you do. If you need to do anything, you have engine, your wing, and your windshield heat are all down here. So our ECS is also set. GPU going to be disconnected. We can verify the master oxygen is on. You should hear that pressurize. And we've done our avionics initialization. Caps pin, I just like to look up, make sure we have that off. That comes off with the statics. So if you do have that still there, go into the VAMs and turn off your statics. The passenger briefing. Today we're going to be flying down to Miami from Orlando. We're on the Danny 3. So we're going to basically take off on the runway. We're going to fly runway heading and then climb up to a top altitude of 15,000 feet as we cruise down the coast of Florida. Then we'll be landing at Miami. Should be about a 40-minute flight. Seatbelts are secured. And your bleed switch should be on. That's fresh air here. So getting ready to go, we will turn on any of our radios that you require. If we're on Unicom or whatever, your comm radios can be accessed here. So if we wanted to update comm 2, so let's say 122.8, and then click to change that over. Then if you want to come in, you can also set your nav frequencies in here by clicking on this box. We don't have any nav frequencies for this. This is an RNAV departure. But if you wanted to tune in a VOR or an ILS here, you can. So the ATIS here at MCO, we have information Tango, wind 180 at 10, gusting 19 knots. So pretty windy. Altimeter is 3008. They're departing 17 right, 18 left, and 18 right. Altimeter is set 3008. We're looking at 100 feet. That's about right. Transponder down here. We're going to squawk just 2000 as a placeholder. Make sure we're on altitude reporting and hit enter. So for our initial heading, we are going to take off of the runway and fly heading. We're going to fly runway heading until we climb out, and then 139. But that depends on what runway we get. We're down here on the far side of MCO, so a 18 right would be kind of ideal for us. So if we take 18 right, we would get a heading of 139. You can use the heading knob down here, and it'll spin around your G3000 system. 139, and we'll just have that ready to go. And we're going to set our own top altitude of 10,000, so coming up here to the altitude select, and just running that up to 10,000. Now, if you want to set your speeds based on what's in the FMS, you can do that there. If you want to mess with the auto throttle, we're going to do it manually for now. And if you want to increase the speeds, and this is where it's hard to look down and do this, there's a scroll wheel down here where you can increase the speeds. We'll do 100 something knots until we see our V speeds. That'll be good. Flight controls, good check. Make sure everything moves when you hit it. And we're going to set trim to 6 degrees up. We also want a flaps 50, so that's 1 notch of flaps. Roll trim should be good. We're going to want it centered. And then you can press the toggle button. I would have that bound to something. Cast messages are probe heat off and parking brake. We'll turn probe heat on. And everyone's got their seats done. Parking brakes or released brakes are done. So we will set up our V speeds too. So coming down here to V speeds, takeoff. This is what it's calculating for us of 90, 94, and 165. We'll leave that for now. But hit all on to bug it, and then that will come up here. We'll set then our IAS for VX at 94 knots. And increase from there. And again, I have this bound to my, I have this control bound with X's and O's, which is an external program to this panel, but you don't have to. It's just, that's especially a hard one. All right, so we are about ready to taxi. And at this point, we're good to go. We're going to taxi out to 18 right here at Orlando via Alpha. And we're going to pull parking brake. Make sure chocks are out of the way. Release the brake and go. It does not take very much power to get this thing going. All right, so we're coming here to the runway. We're holding short of 18 right. And we're going to do a quick departure briefing. We're taking off on runway 18 right here in our Vision Jet. Our V1's going to be 90 knots. Then we're going to rotate 94 and climb out around that. We can accelerate then 165 knots. We'll take up gear and flaps too. Anything below V1, we will put on the brakes, put out, and pull the flaps and start the, and come back to the FBO over here. Departure's going to be the Danny 3. We are climbing, we're going to basically climb out runway heading, then left, or then a left turn heading 139 direct Cape, where we'll be at or above 1,500 feet, climbing up to a top altitude of 10,000, expecting flight level 1, or not flight level, expecting 15,000 feet not long after. So landing lights, as required, we're going to turn them on, but there are some limits for probe heat as well above 5C, so be careful of that. We don't want to burn out the composites. So probe heat also on if it's not on yet. Ice protection, we're going to put engine on and leave everything else off for the moment as we climb out. And then wing and stab, ice protection off. Cast messages are good. We have no messages. Trim is 6 degrees. Flaps set, flaps 50. And we don't have that cast message displayed. We've configured our MFDs as needed, and that will be it. Now I want to bring back the just the full screen map, so you can go over here and click full. If you want to split it again, you can click the half there, and that's how you control that with the MFDs. We're going to go full map here for the moment. Last thing before we go, flight directors on. We're going to set heading mode and a flight level change at, and that's going to wipe out my speed, but at about 100 knots. All right, so we're going to release the brakes and roll out onto the runway. Takeoff in this airplane is very simple. We're simply going to gently advance the throttles to the full position, we should see takeoff thrust in the cast messages section. And then we're going to let it accelerate using rudder as required. $90 knots. We're going to go ahead and rotate here. And it shouldn't take much convincing. Positive gear up. We'll bring the flaps up. Then once we clear the runway, we will make that left-hand turn, heading 137, following the flight directors. Also going to increase our speed up a little bit, 160. We'll aim for about 165 here for that initial climb. Now at this point you can put on the autopilot if you want to. This is one plane that I really enjoy hand flying, just because of the visibility, and if you have a stick that you're flying it with, it's definitely a good one to use. So we're on our way. We're going to bring throttle back just about to the green. And then, if you want to, you can press auto throttle here too as well. I am in manual mode with the auto throttle, but you can also go with the FMS. So now, if we want to go direct to Cape, which is going to be the next thing we can do, go down to the flight plane. It's going to yell at us, and that's fine. But if you really want to, you could set direct Cape. I think we may have passed it. We'll go ahead and just go direct to UK. And that'll do it. So we'll follow the magenta line there now. Turn autopilot on, and you can go into nav mode. Clicking the nav, you should see a triangle above it. Now as we climb out, obviously you don't have as much power as some other bigger jets. Much like, again, this airplane is very much more like a general aviation plane with a jet strapped to the back than a true big private jet. So I wouldn't expect to climb out at 250 knots every time. Your top speed's going to be around there. But just if you want to climb out around 200 knots, you can. Your best rate's going to be about 165. But if you want to move a little faster because you're in congested airspace or whatever, you can do that by manipulating that. Now, I haven't messed with VNAV in this airplane very much. It does have a function. If you want to go in and enable it, you can. It clicks on this, but I don't know how much of that works and how well it works. Generally, I'm controlling this plane with the flight level change and all that stuff. So I handle the vertical navigation myself, but there are some of those things in there that you can explore. I don't know how well they work. So we're going to clear ourselves up to our final altitude, 15,000. Alright, so we're on our way. We just passed the Danny. And we're going to cruise 16,000 feet here for a little bit. And then we're going to start coming down around Wrecked, just before Wrecked, down the Florida coast. So in the cruise, we're not doing too much. We're just hitting our cruising altitude now, 15,000 feet. Again, if you want to climb faster, we can go slower. For now, we can actually start to crank it up. Select the right knob. I think on a good day up this high, you can maybe get 230 indicated. A little lower, you might be able to push it closer to 250, where the barber pole kind of sets. I also have our fuel page up just to check and see how our fuel is. If you want to see other ones, we can go into aircraft systems and pull up electrical power, landing gear, ice protection, and here's the general status page. We'll keep fuel up for now. But you can do that on either side of the MFD. And again, if I want to go back to a full map, I just do map and full. So plenty to play with, plenty of functionality here baked in with the G3000. And I did have to massage this going direct to greed, and then hopefully picking up the rest of the flight plan after that. And it looks like brain and reality aren't meshing. 1/6000 was what I said we would do. So we'll go up to 1/6000. And we'll just lower the speed, and we should get that pretty quickly before we start coming down. Now, other things to think about in the cruise. Your icing systems here. Your wing and stabilizer trim, your windshield trim, or your windshield anti-ice and wing and stab ice. Useful if you're flying individual moisture in icing conditions. The windshield will ice up if you don't have that on, but the turning the windshield anti-ice onto high will usually take care of that. It's now we're in the cruise. We've stopped climbing, and you can see auto throttle. We've got auto throttle alive. Once it activates, you should see the triangle above it. We're now in FMS mode, which means it's putting in 250 knots for the cruise. We'll see how close we get to that. So Miami currently real life information Romeo, wind 1309, gusting 17. They are departing 8 left, 8 right, 9, and 12. But I'm on the departure radius, so that's not going to help. Let's try it again. So from the real world, Miami information Echo 130 at 9, gusting 17 knots. Some cloud, that's under 3003. They've got, I'm expecting the ILS 8 right, 9, and runway 12. I would like runway 12 if we can get it. But I think we're set up for 8 right now. So we should be okay to switch over. We're going to do procedures to the approach. We want the ILS for 12. And I just want to update this too. So we're still going to Espresso, but we'll just check out and make sure this is all good. Yeah, it should be good. Alright, so we're going to start a descent now, coming down towards Rect. We need to cross the Rect 15,000, at or above 15,000, so it's not a hard deck. And I'm going to go ahead and take manual control over the speed as well, just to make that a little bit easier. And then we'll just step it down to 13,000. And this is how I fly this plane again. There are some VNAV functionalities, but I find this to be a little bit more reliable. Can make sure we're zooming in on what's happening here. Now we changed runways to the ILS for runway 12, so let's pull that up too. That has a localizer, a frequency of 108.9, so let's go ahead and put that in now. Come over to audio and radios. 108.9, which is active, which is good. So it will auto load that frequency. And then when we switch over to localizer mode to run the approach, it should follow. Alright, so we're going to descend and maintain 6,000 feet as we prepare for our approach into Miami. So running our approach checklist, approach briefing is completed. We're going to be shooting the ILS for runway 12. They're going to vector us over. We're descending to 6,000. Will be kind of a long downwind and then turn final for runway 12. That's the most favorable for the winds. Should help us out. Seats normal upright position. Ice protection is as required. We're going to leave engine on, everything else off. Lights, landing lights are on. Flaps will go to 50% when we are in airspeed range, and then airspeed 140 knots when we're ready for the approach. Remember, below 190 for 50% flaps, and below 210 to extend the gear. You can see the airport just off our nose. We are aggressively descending at the moment. So what we can do is shore up our speed a little bit to avoid the dive bombing situation. And then before we get down, before landing, we need to check gear down and lock the flaps as required. Cabin pressure difference about 0 psi. Windshield IPS needs to be off because that fluid could decrease. Flight visibility autopilot will be turned off then, and then we'll go VREF to VREF plus 10. Now, last thing, speed bugs for landing. We'll turn these on and we'll turn the takeoff bugs off. About 100 knots and about 90 knots for VREF, about 100 knots for the approach. Good general rules. Again, you could rough that in if you had some better data. For now, we'll go back to full map mode. And about this time, we'd probably get a heading to hold. So we're going to fly heading 270 and descend and maintain 3,000 feet. Now, speed-wise, we will, as we start to get on downwind, we'll get down to 3,000 feet and slow down. You don't need a ton of runway to slow down. It's generally pretty responsive. But it is something to think about when you're coming in to, if you're coming in hot like this. It's pretty agile, pretty good for hand flying. And it's not super slippery once you cut power. Now, coming up here, we're going to turn right to heading 303. So coming back, I'm going to come back here to the PFD, shift our nav source back over to nav 1. That's where we have the localizer for runway 12. Kind of on a long downwind. I'm also going to start bringing the speed down to a point where we could start extending gear and flaps. So 195. Again, ATC probably wants you to keep your speed up, but we're going to kind of drop it at least below 200, down to that maybe 190 mark, so that we could theoretically deploy flaps too if we needed help slowing down. So getting configured, we're going to turn left, heading about 210 to intercept this localizer. Coming down here, we'll arm approach mode. That'll help us pick up the glide slope and localizer when it comes in. Drop speed to 180 and throw gear, and that will help. Now we're still in auto throttle mode, but again, if you want full control, this is I find this to be an enjoyable plane to fly, just mostly because of the visibility. At this point, we'll go 50% flaps as well. And we can bring it on down to 2,000 feet. Intercept the glide slope. Right around that waypoint VEPCO. So again, you can get configured pretty quickly and without too much heartache. Again, this is a pretty responsive plane. You can see the runway right there. We are on the crossing runway, so there's two that go long ways that way, and then runway 12, which crosses. So it looks like we're a little farther out than we are, but we're actually pretty good. Localizer's starting to come in. And just missed a little bit. But not too bad. We're in a pretty good position. And just to practice in small planes at big airports, I like to try to put on the brakes around 6 DME. If we can. So we're going to try to slow to about 100 knots. We got a long runway. If you're a little faster, we're not. It's not a terribly unforgiving plane. But we can at least start to get ourselves into a position where we can deploy full flaps. And the automation is great. But I'm going to go ahead and take control. So the autopilot will cycle the auto throttle off too. Now below 150, we'll go with that second notch of flaps. And our approach speed's about 100 knots, and then our VREF's going to be 90 knots. And we do, like other G3000 aircraft, we do have a flight path vector marker, the green circle, the green velocity vector, which we can just kind of want to keep over the runway. We're about at 100 knots now. Again, it's not going to take a ton of power, even fully configured. We are a little high. Just holding it will float a little bit if you let it. But we'll put it down. Rolling out, we can bring the flaps up. And you can brake as needed. We're going to vacate to the left and taxi over to the FBO the long way. Alright, so we've made it over to the FBO. We're going to put parking brake on, and from here, it is extremely simple. And we can turn all our probe heat off. Probably should have been turned off by the time we turned off the runway with this composite planting. Oxygen, all that stuff off. Landing lights off. We'll leave strobes on until we get done with all that. We just disarm anything else. And then, all we're really doing is stopping the engine, but turning the dial off, and then hitting engine stop. Engine spool down. We can go back. We can open up the doors. Let our passengers off. If you really want to increase your immersion, you put your wheel chocks on. Take your headphones off. And you've made it. From here, strobes, generators, and then the battery can come off whenever you are ready to deboard the airplane and close it up. So that's the Vision Jet. It's pretty simple. It's pretty comparable to anything that's going on with, if you're familiar with the Honda Jet or with TBM or any other G3000 based system. It's going to be pretty similar in terms of that user interface, but there are a couple of quirks that are involved. I still haven't quite figured out the VNav. I don't know how well it works or if it works, so I tend to stick with flight level change, but and that will get you to where you need to go, especially if you're flying on VATSIM or anything like that. But a very capable airplane, perfectly capable of everything you need to do. And it's good fun. It's got a great cockpit, great visuals. And it kind of straddles that line between private jet and GA sports car. So thank you for coming in. If you have any questions, comments, other planes you want to see, drop in the comment section below. All the usual YouTube stuff helps out the channel a lot. Like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, I think that's just about it. Thanks for coming along. Have a great flying, and yeah, enjoy.